Hello and welcome to Metra AVTechTips. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
And he's looking off into the distance.
That's right. Trying to fix the volume just a little bit here. That should be better. Okay. Keep going.
I don't really see now I'm redlining.
Oh, I didn't touch you.
Oh, okay.
Well, in
I'm
that case,
plenty
we'll bring
loud.
you down. There we go. All right. So, everybody.
Hello. Welcome to Wednesday.
Yeah, that's right.
As far as you know.
Who are you?
I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
And it's Metra AVTechTips again.
Again. So, everybody, thank you for joining us today. As always, like, share, subscribe, hit the little bell to let you know whenever we do go live, which, of course, is every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Now, what you may or may not have noticed is that today we are not live. Instead,
No, I'm very alive.
Well, we're alive, but we're not live airing.
No, because today
It's
is...
pre-recorded.
It's Friday.
Yeah. Well, and right now, you are, I'm assuming, sipping some wine in wine country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be in Northern California.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I am actually on my, at this moment right now, I'm either on my way or I'm in Southern Florida getting ready for a show. So,
yep.
Hello, future self. You're probably getting ready for a show. There you
I
go.
just want to say, just to let myself know that you look good.
There you go. Let future self know. There you go. Okay. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us today. Like I said, like, share, subscribe, hit the little bell, let you know whenever we do go live or whenever we release another video.
And we've got 4 interviews coming up from that I did at the TV Shootout, which are excellent.
Yeah.
They're in post-production now, getting all the titles and all the fancy schmancy stuff added to it.
Up and everything. Or by the time this video goes out, maybe there'll be...
Yeah, there's a fair amount of work, and one of them was an hour long, so we're trying to decide how to...
trim it down a little bit.
Yeah, that's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
Actually, 3 of the 4 are very long.
Yeah.
Not long in duration, or long in duration, but not long in enjoyment.
Sure. So, okay. Why are we pre-recording this episode? One, both of us are off doing something else right now, but 2, I really wanted to get this topic out here because I wanted this to be kind of a debate, but I also wanted to flip it on its head on what I think is the best control method.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that title, and the title
you weren't too
alone,
keen on it anyways.
No, what is the official title now?
So the official title for today's episode, if I can turn on my little controller here, the official title for today's episode is What Control Method is Best? Now,
I'll tell you what the best control method is, because I grew up with this control method.
Yeah, sure.
And somewhere in the 60s, somewhere between 1964 and 1969, when I was a young man, you know, in my 40s.
Sure. Yeah.
The control method was simple. Son, go put it on channel 6.
Yep. Yep.
And turn it up a little bit. That was a very effective control method.
It was the early...
I promise you, it always got the TV to channel 6.
And turned up the volume
and the volume went up a little bit.
Yeah, it was the predecessor to voice commands. Voice
control. I was butler in a box, baby.
There you go. You were Josh.
Son,
there you go.
Go do.
So, part of what I wanted to talk about today is just the control method, and I think honestly, you kind of hit the nail on the head that one of the best control methods out there is just pushing a button, right? Just walking up to the device itself and actually just hitting the button and making it do whatever it was that you planned for it to do, right? I think that would be one of the easiest and most straightforward ways of control.
Yeah. Turn the knob.
Yeah. So.
And that's why you have kids.
Yeah, of course. Now, of course, that's what we're being satirical here, but...
No, really. That's why you have kids.
So, what I do want to talk about is...
Along with son clean the pool.
Sure.
Son cut the grass.
Sure. Yeah.
Wash the car.
Mine's not quite there yet. They're not quite there yet. They're almost there.
That's because you've got coddle modern kids that... Dad, no, I'm playing with my phone.
They don't have a phone, surprisingly.
Smart man.
Right? Okay, so
it's child abuse.
So true methods of control at this point, right? So let's think automation systems and different ways that we can actually control things through an automation system. You've got infrared, or IR.
Yes.
You've got radio frequency, or RF.
Yes. Hold on, you know.
Yep.
RF.
Yep.
Or IR.
Or IR. You've got serial, or RS232, or 485, right? You've got, nowadays, we have Bluetooth.
Yep.
Right? So, actually, in fact, the LG TV.
Guess who did not turn his phone off?
Guess what I'm going to do before I'm next? We've got Bluetooth from the remote to the TV now in a lot of cases, and in fact, like
some cable boxes,
the Apple TV, some Roku cable remotes, a lot of those are Bluetooth based. They actually communicate to the box over Bluetooth. So other than Bluetooth, then of course we get into IP. IP is a little bit more robust in what it can actually transmit from one end to another and back. And usually IP is what we're looking for when we're trying to transmit a lot of data, right? A lot of information.
Whether it's hardwired or wireless.
Yeah, that's right. So then from there, we have probably one of the newer styles out of everything that's here is something like a Zigbee mesh.
Yeah, but see, to me, that falls right back on the original RF.
Well, and
Because
it's
it still is.
Well, it's RF, but so is Wi-Fi, right? So
True.
IP and with which Wi-Fi falls under, where the Zigbee, it's actually closer to Wi-Fi. It's part of the 802 specification. I forget what the rest of it, but it's part of the 802. I think it's 802.25. I think maybe. Don't quote me on that, but I'll look it up later. But you've also got in that mesh method you have Z-Wave, right? So Z-Wave is very similar to Zigbee.
Mm-hmm.
It uses, I believe, the same frequencies, but it has a slightly different language that it uses to communicate
So
with.
they're not compatible.
Right. Then now you have Bluetooth mesh, right? So the Bluetooth, the BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy.
Low energy,
Right.
for hopping along and going greater distances.
It creates a mesh
with
of its
better
own.
battery usage.
Yep. You've got Zigbee, Z-Wave, Bluetooth mesh. There's also Thread, which is a Google-based control method that they're opening up to other manufacturers and stuff to use as well. There's actually in the mesh world, the way of communication is actually increasing for the different methodologies that are out there.
Well, they're low power, low latency.
Right. So
And the power is incredibly critical.
well, and especially the devices that are battery operated. How many times have we looked at battery operated devices that check temperature or that have a relay?
Blinds now.
Yeah, you can get a battery operated blind that lasts
Over
6
a
months
year.
over a year, 6 months to over a year. So when we have IR, RF, RS232 or 485 or serial, Bluetooth, IP, Zigbee, Z-Wave, Bluetooth,
Mesh.
mesh and stuff like that.
BLE, blah, 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 blah.
Out of all of these, and I'll ask you this question because I think I know your answer. Which one is the best?
Well, it's kind of like, what's the best drink? What's the best hair color? It's all about application.
Sure.
And we joke about this all the time, but I still use a lot of IR because what's the biggest advantage that IR offers a control system?
It just kind of works.
It's optically isolated.
Yeah, that's very true.
And
That's very true.
And
Yeah.
the advantage of optical isolation is there's no grounding. There's no physical, mechanical, electrical connection
Yep.
if you're using an emitter
Yep.
between point A and point B.
Right.
And that resolves a lot of issues.
Yeah.
And we joke about putting an emitter onto an IR receiver
yeah,
and calling
yeah.
it optically isolated.
But it is.
But it is.
Yeah. Well, and there's also the benefit of using that optical method where you don't have to run a wire in some cases. So, for instance, if you've got your automation system on one side of the room and you've got the TV that you're trying to control on the other side of the room, instead of having a control wire that's ran all the way across the room, if you just have an IR blaster that emits from one side,
Right.
which then goes to the display, you don't have to run an extra
Or
cable.
in a number of the control systems, you can do both simultaneously. You can do RF and IR commands
Correct.
on the same macro.
Right.
So yeah, I can control the TV with basic IR power on, off,
Yep.
and volume,
Yep.
but still control my fancy automation matrix, whatever else,
Right.
via RF.
Right.
So I'm a big fan of there is no best.
Sure.
There are great options and multiple options for each opportunity. Now, you have one of our matrices laid out here.
Yep.
Now, for example, we're not going to go to the back of the matrix yet. We're going to start with the front of the matrix.
Sure.
What is the control method on the front of this matrix?
There's buttons.
Well, and what was the first thing you said?
Buttons.
What's the second method on the front of this unit?
We have IR.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, typically a custom integrator is probably not going to do IR.
On a matrix.
Typically. But
Typically.
here's the thing, when you look at our matrix
Yep.
and a couple of others, all the discrete commands are there, so you can still build the same macros.
Yeah, right.
So if you need to get in and out of a job quickly,
Yeah.
you can probably do IR control with less back-end work
Right.
from a programming standpoint than RS232 or IP.
Well, and especially if you're not going into more of the fine controls of something, right? So,
Right.
like our matrix
We just want to
has
send source 1 to zone 2.
Right. Well, and we can, over RS-232 or serial and IP, we can change the EDID information that's going back to the source devices through those commands. On IR, we don't have those commands.
Because we don't, it's not that extensive of a library.
Where would you need that is the main thing.
And that's the thing, other than setup.
Right. So when you have this here, if you have a 4x4 matrix, that's 16 combinations of options, right?
And that's it.
That's it. Is that right? 16? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 4 times 4. So there's only 16 codes that you really have to put into your macros, right?
Well, no, it's not 16 codes. Well, it's 8 codes. Source 1, 2, 3, 4, zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you just build the macro based on that because
yes, correct. You select which one it is. Yeah.
You actually
macros,
only
you have 16 macros.
You only have 8 codes.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. But you would wind up with a total of 16 macros because you can have up to 16 combinations of that layout. And the thing with that is that it means that you can get in and out very quickly on a job after you've already got it set up.
And on a basic job where you don't have IP or serial control.
Right.
So you've got a basic RTI, URC, whatever.
Sure.
With IR control, you're not out in the water. It's like, oh, what do? I can't do the job. Of course you can do the job because we have given you that ability right there.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, that's going to do 99% of every job.
Sure.
It's going to do 100% of what you need for a basic job.
Yes.
Because you can still sign in with your laptop and do all the EDID stuff. If you do want faster or verified control, there's the big difference. Verified control.
Well, and something else that the IR does not control is like the audio matrixing, because this has audio breakout on it, and it also has the ability to matrix that audio from port to port.
So you can get much deeper into the commands.
Correct. Now the IR doesn't have that part of it, but that's still something that, again, in most cases, you're going to lock it into following the source or following the output. Right. So the next method, of course, in this one, now we don't have RF on this matrix, but we do have RS-232 or serial, right? So where would you? And actually, let's go along this method, right? So far we've talked about IR and its application and why you might want to use it, right? So let's talk about
it's still being valid.
Right. So let's talk about, before we get to RF, let's talk about RS-232, and we'll use this as an example.
Okay.
Where would you use RS-232 above any of the other control methods?
Well, there's still a whole lot of control systems out there put in the early 2000s that are not IP based.
Sure.
I mean, let's face it, it's primarily Crestron.
Right.
But there'll be some AMX and some older RTI.
Sure. There's Extron. There's, a bunch
It's
of
still
other ones out
serial
there.
controlled.
Yeah.
And our guys running off PCs. So serial control still offers a very robust, valid, and verifiable control format.
Yep.
Now, is it as fast as IP? No. But I don't. The speed is irrelevant in this application.
Well, we're only sending very short strings of information.
Even if it's machine code at 32 characters, it's still, you're going to get an acknowledgement faster than you can do anything with it.
Right. That's right.
And the nice thing about RS-232, particularly if you're setting up macros, is you got a wider control list than you do with IR.
Yep.
And you can also bank things quicker. So an IR command, you send it, you wait, you send it, you wait. With a serial command, typically a 0.02 second gap is really all you need, because as soon as it sees the acknowledgement, it's ready for the next command.
You can move on. Yeah, that's right. You don't have to put in a delay. We actually was talking, That's some great grammar right there. We were
Is that Northern New York or Branson grammar?
It's a little bit of both. So we were talking to a gentleman yesterday, I believe. This is in the past, of course, now for going live. But we were talking to a gentleman
last week?
Last week, there you go. Who was talking about how he had he was asking for the serial or the API for, actually was talking for the big dog stuff.
Right.
But one of the things that he talked about was another manufacturer of a different type of device had a limitation where they had to have at least a second and a half between commands, which for whatever reason they had that requirement. I don't see why they would have needed that type of delay put into it for that type of
terrible
control.
Processor?
I guess maybe, but
the longest I've ever had to use on anything is a second.
Right. But a second and a half, that's
a long,
and even a second is a really long time.
And typically that would be on, for example, you're turning on a TV. You have to wait for that TV to come on to select an input.
Right.
So generally what you do is, if you're building a macro, you send your TV power command first, then your AVR power command, and then maybe a source power command. Then you send your TV input command, your AVR income, because this way it gives everything a chance to go on. So the time is just, it's there even though you're not building in delays.
Right, right. So with RS-232, one of the benefits that we've seen so far is that a wider birth of commands, right?
And quicker, typically, in verified results.
Correct, yeah. It actually sends an acknowledgement back saying, yes, I got the command, and or it's doing the command. I know with ours, our matrix, we actually get an echo of the command. Well, it's not quite an echo. It's actually a specific string. It's an acknowledgement of what you just asked it to do. So if you say, let's see, I think it's set in output 0, which is all of the outputs, set output 0 to input 1, its response will be out 0 in 1. And so that way it actually tells you that, yes,
without the set there, so you know that it's done it.
Correct, yeah.
Or it's
just
in
a
the
response.
process.
Right. Now, for someone who's building their own system based on those commands, they're not using a driver, not using a module or anything else that's pre-made, if they're building that themselves, then they can parse that information.
Say, when you see this, do this.
Do the next thing, right? Go ahead and send this command, wait for that. When you receive that back, now you're free to do the next step, right? What else do you get from RS-232 that you don't get in, say, something else?
Well, you want to define the something else a little more?
Maybe the, let's say, for instance, why would you use RS-232 or serial over IP?
Honestly, unless my control system required it, I probably wouldn't.
Okay.
Because first off, you're not going to have as many serial ports typically on the back of your control processor as you do as you do Ethernet ports on your switch.
Yep.
So
now,
I mean, can't you
daisy RS-232 in serial?
You can, but there's issues to daising RS-232s. First off, you have to have an addressable unit.
Okay.
And then, so if Sony used to be big on this with their TVs. So if you had 3 Sony TVs, you could actually address, and there was a header that went in front of that command for TV1, TV2, TV3.
Yep.
And then they would have loop out serial cables, or you had a serial distribution box.
Yeah.
But you had to have the headers. Otherwise, they just all did the same thing. Now, if you wanted them all to do the same thing,
you could send that command.
That's fine.
Yeah. Now, ours actually has that. Did you know
Right,
that?
but I mean, if you have 3 TVs and you just wanted them all to go to the same input all the time, every time.
Correct. This actually has the ability to set it up as an ID for it. So you can actually have multiple IDs for the matrices. I don't know if you knew that or not. But
on the serial, I did not.
Yeah. So ours actually has that ability for it. So now...
So if you've got an older control system, that's a great thing.
Right. Now with this piece here, using RS-232, at least for me anyways, one of the reasons that I would use it before I used IP is because I'm not relying on another system
to carry your data for you.
To carry the data that could have a fault.
Which also keeps you outside of the outside world, so you don't have to worry about any security issues.
Well, there's that too, because if they're a malicious party that's trying to get in and control and do something, maybe a power system or a lighting system, they could get in and mess around with it. So if you're worried about that security, having an RS-232, which is a one physical link point to point, you don't have to worry about that. So that's one nice thing about it. You don't have to mess around with relying on another system. You don't have to know another system. So if you're not very techie or tech savvy when it comes to the network.
And the setup for serial is simpler. Okay, I'm going to pick my modem speed.
Yep.
And there's generally a wide variety. Do we accept 115?
On this one, you can change it to 115.
Will it accept up to 115?
Yes.
Okay. So you got to get your stop bits.
Yep.
Generally, it's in the old days it could be 5 to 7 wires. Now it's 3.
Yeah.
RX, TX, and ground.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And there's any number of breakouts that allow you to use Cat5 or twisted wire. That has a serial port and just a breakout for those 3 wires, so you don't have to even have a cable.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Now, the only thing you do have to worry about is what's called a Null Modem.
Yeah.
And
the Sony 777s?
Yeah, you don't find a lot of Null Modem devices, any anymore.
Yeah, not anymore.
And if you did have a Null Modem cable, you had to be very careful to mark it as such, because why is this not working?
Yep.
TX to TX, RX to RX.
Yep, exactly. Okay. So that's where you would use RS-232, or where I would use RS-232 over IP or any other other methods. So, by the way, everybody who's watching, let us know in the comments, one, either your favorite method of control, two, what you think is the best method of control, or three, tell us where you would use each one specifically.
And I want to add an age requirement to that. I want to know, is it the older guy sticking with 232?
Sure. Or RF or IR.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, when I say older, I mean over 50.
Sure, sure.
Not my age.
Well, I was going to say,
not dead.
We don't need to do older than dirt, and then 50, and
right,
then
just
younger,
older.
right? We just need to do older. Okay. Yeah, let us know about that and what generation you're from, so that we can see, you know.
I'm going to assume pretty much anybody
there, right?
under 40s
IP.
looking at serial and saying why.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I'll challenge that actually, because I do know a few dealers that, you know, are in the younger ages that would use serial before they use the IP. Strictly for the reasons that we talked about, in that it's more secure, and there's less that can go wrong because it's just point to point.
Well, yeah, you don't have to worry about addresses and subnets, anything else. All you got to do is just make sure that the modem speed, the stop bits, and a couple of things, and it's real simple to set up.
Well, and when you have a device like this that's considered part of the backbone of the system, you kind of want it to work every single time.
Right, and at least on ours, the command structure is very nice. It's short and simple.
It makes sense too. And when you the set command versus the get command are structured the same from command to command to command. So you don't you can actually guess in many instances what the command is, and you would come out right.
I used to do a matrix from a company called Knox.
Okay.
Audio matrix, and they did things a little weird. For example, if you wanted to set volume. It was, zone V and the volume, but it wasn't 0 through 63, which was their steps.
Sure.
It was alpha characters and strange, like exclamation points. So you had to have the chart with you all the time.
To know, because you're not going to memorize it.
Because it's like, why would you do this? I mean, why is it not just 0 to 63?
Yeah, yeah.
0 is off, 63 is max.
Sure.
Why would it not be that? No, it wasn't.
Of course not. No. So then we have Bluetooth. Now, Bluetooth, I think, is a little bit of a curveball, because in the world that you and I come from, Bluetooth isn't really used a lot, right?
No, it's hard to support.
Yeah, because we have new versions of Bluetooth. You have distance limitations. You have all these things going on.
Bluetooth 1.0, 2.0, BLE.
Problems here and there with it. Now, there's devices that integrate into systems. Like I know Control 4 had their music bridge at one time that accepted a Bluetooth connection, to where then you could use that as an audio source.
Right, but it wasn't a control source, it was just a source.
Well, it sent like the standard Bluetooth play, pause, fast forward, rewind commands, but that was it. It didn't actually give you
okay, so back
stuff.
up. If I'm using my phone as a source via Bluetooth, from the touch panel I could do play, pause?
Yes, you could.
Okay.
Yes, you could. Yep. Which was kind of a neat thing, but that's one of those, it's like CEC, right? Which is another control method that we'll talk about. Which I didn't write down, but I wanted to, so that we don't forget to talk about it. But yeah, no, it's like CEC, where it has like default commands or generic commands, right? And so it just utilizes those commands as play, pause, stop, and fast forward.
But it's fairly limited. You can't go into find artist and file.
Now the newer Bluetooth stuff, I'm not sure of how much integration they have.
Okay, I got a question for you. Do you remember when IR was two-way and is actually information fed back to the remote?
No.
Sony had an AVR in the early 2000s, fairly fancy schmancy, semi-touchscreen remote.
Are you talking about the one from Denon?
No, it was a Sony.
Okay.
And I think it was the 555, but
had the LCD screen on?
Had an LCD screen, but you would receive data back to the remote, assuming that you had the remote pointed at the correct direction.
Right.
They would feedback source, volume, stuff like this to the remote. It didn't last but one series of product, because it was much more trouble than it was worth.
Well, and that's kind of like they're using those with like air conditioning systems and split.
But those typically aren't IR; they're RF of some variety.
In many cases, there are some that they use the IR because they're cheaper for whatever reason. But it does have that two-way
the mini split feedback.
Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting way to do that. Now, but again, Bluetooth, honestly, is quickly becoming a valid way to control things. I mean, like I said, most modern day televisions and Apple TVs and Rokus and whatever
And
else.
some cable boxes.
And some cable boxes are using Bluetooth as a way to control it. Now, what I find interesting also is where they're not using Bluetooth. The LG, the TV here, with their smart remote, the power button is not over Bluetooth. You have to point it at the TV. So if I block it, it doesn't turn off the TV. But as soon as I unblock and hit the button, it turns off the TV.
But other commands may be Bluetooth.
The rest of the commands are. All of them. The volume up, volume down, mute, channel, all that, the navigation keys, everything else is Bluetooth except for
I wonder why.
The only thing I
know
can
you
think
have
of
a
is that,
speculation
well,
on
my
this.
speculation is that it's maybe the Bluetooth module that they're using, or the radio that they're using, turns off in the midst when it's going to sleep. Or if it's in an off state.
Well, okay.
Right? You unplug power and plug power
We
back
were talking about cereal.
Yeah.
In the early 2000s, Pioneer Sharp sold the same TV.
Mm-hmm.
Sharp made it for Pioneer. And there was a serial off command,
But not a serial on
but
command?
not a serial on command. You had to turn the TV on with IR.
Ah.
So if you were
Was there a toggle at least? Like a standby toggle?
not on serial,
Wow.
so you had the IR on,
But you had serial off.
but you had serial off.
That's a pain. That's only a pain. There's no value to that.
It was frustrating.
I can't think of any.
And particularly if you ever saw an early, and I'll dig one up for you, an
Sure.
earlier guide to serial command structures,
Right.
they were horrible. It's like, what is this telling me? Just show me an example.
Sure. So, where would you use, and I have an answer for myself, and I want to see if yours is the same, where would you use Bluetooth control in your installations?
There's not a single automation system I am currently using that has Bluetooth capability.
Right.
Now, having said that, my automation's dwindling at home because my Roku remote
Yeah.
does everything I need to do. It turns my TV on, it
The volume controls your
does
AVR,
everything. Now, I still have, beside the bed,
an RTI remote.
an RTI remote, but I'm down to using one button on it, which is the Amazon input to the Matrix
Sure.
for background music
Sure.
and lighting.
Yeah.
So I use the volume, one source button, and the programmable keys there for lighting, and that's its only purpose.
Yeah. Well,
And now it used to do a lot of stuff.
the job that you and I worked on that we talk about quite a bit, in the guest rooms, we don't have control 4 in those guest rooms.
Because it just confused the...
Well, we try to make it as simple as possible for the guest rooms because nobody has to learn anything,
Right, because it changes from week to week who's there.
Right, and in most cases, the people using those rooms already have the device that's in there, which in this case is an Amazon Fire Stick.
No, it's Roku's now.
Did we change it over to Roku?
Yes. Yes, I did.
That's right. That's right.
We did change over to
Yeah.
Roku.
So, what's funny about that is you have Sony TVs in there which are Wi-Fi based, and you have the Rokus in there which are Wi-Fi based. So it'd actually be very easy to integrate those into the rest of the system.
But
we're not going to
because it doesn't give us
Roku,
anything.
Well, the Roku remote it's Bluetooth based.
Well, they've also got their phone. They can, anybody's got a
you can
Roku app
cast
can
to
sign into it.
Yep, and control it that way, and
Listen to headphones.
it's all right there, and it makes it very easy to go ahead and just put it in there and let it ride.
Which is kind of the antithesis of what we do, but it isn't. Our job is to make it simple
That's right.
for the user.
That's right. The starting point for us really is supposed to be the usability for the user, right?
Not the hardware in the back end.
Well, you and I had this discussion about like the way that you program Crestron versus how other guys might program Crestron. You start at your panel.
Yes, and go backwards.
And work your way back to the thing. Because you say to yourself, I need this room to do this. Then you work your way back and make sure that it can do that, right? You don't start over here and say, I have this equipment, now I can make all that equipment do this, right? You start here and say, I want it to do this, and work your way back.
I start with the consumer and go backwards, not with the hardware and go forwards.
Right. And so in this case, the Bluetooth is great because it's already there. It's already doing what the customer
And
wants
pretty
it
much
to do.
everybody's got one.
And they know how to work it. To their credits, Roku...
Come on, we got a dozen of them around here.
I know, and I just looked at the remote just a little bit ago. I think I've got it. Here it is. To their credit, the Roku remote is ridiculously easy to learn. The learning curve so say for instance, early 2000s,
Oh, okay.
You get a cable box remote. Channel button is almost always going to be on the right hand side. Volume
Volume's
button is going to be on the left. It's going to be a little bit of a rocker, and so you can usually pick up on that. Now Roku started the trend of putting the volume on the side.
I'm honestly not a fan of that.
No, I kind of like it because I feel like it puts it in a spot. It reminds me of cell phones. Cell phones are putting volume buttons on the side, right? But with this, the navigation through the Roku, you don't really have numbers that you use necessarily.
Which, you know, there are certainly times, and it's possible now that Bluetooth keyboards may interface. I don't know.
Yeah, well, they can, and in fact, you can. Well, I don't know if it's Bluetooth keyboards, but you can integrate your phone. So if you were to open up like a spot to type something in, the app on the phone would bring up the keyboard, and you could type it in.
You just channel, you know, like on DirecTV or something like that. Channel entry is nice.
Right. Now, something like this, the learning curve is much higher, but really it's because of how configurable it is.
And how much you can do with it, and just there's a lot of buttons.
Well, and
now,
really,
and by the way, they've gotten in the early days, there was just buttons.
Yeah.
Anybody that ever did the old Mitsubishi programmable, which was a big, the D&M programmable, was this big and just a ton of buttons.
That's what I'm thinking. It was the blue LCD that was on the top, right? It had that membrane style control on it. But like this here,
it wasn't blue, but yeah.
So the learning curve on this is much higher. But the thing is that this can be tweaked to exactly how the customer wants it to be, right? Whereas this,
which is fine if you know the customer, but as soon as somebody else goes in that room,
right? So the nice thing about this is that it's pretty universal when it comes to learning it and using it, and it really creates a nice way for it to work. And again, you've got volume on the side of it. You've got power right there. You usually have the top 4 streaming apps of the day on the buttons. We got Netflix, Hulu, and Disney.
I never think to use those.
No, but I have started to. My kids, especially.
And I think on mine it doesn't. It's just they're just color coded on mine.
Sure.
But I've never shortcutted them. Now this has 2 shortcuts plus those 4. So this is what remote is this?
This is the one that you play games with.
Okay.
So you can actually like download, I think it's like Angry Birds or something, onto the Roku and use it like a gamepad.
Yeah, that's not happening.
So for Bluetooth, honestly, it's nice in those applications where you're not doing a full automation system, or you are doing a full automation system, but it's for like a guest room or something else where you don't really need to control that.
You don't need a $1,500 remote in that room.
Right, because you're not going to be automating anything in there to begin with anyways, because you don't want to mess up the guest who's staying there who probably doesn't have the same schedule as the people who own the house, right? And so you don't want to set it to turn off at 3 a.m. automatically if the client's going to be, or if the guest is going to be, maybe they're insomniac and they don't sleep.
You.
Sure. I've started taking melatonin. Wonders. If you can't sleep, melatonin's fantastic.
Just for what it's worth, if I've got 5 minutes, that's 4 minutes and 52 seconds of sleep.
Yeah, well, you're also military trained, so you've got, you sleep where you can get it.
I legitimately don't understand I can't sleep.
Yeah, yeah, I get
I
that.
know it exists, I see it. I don't.
You're just not in there.
I don't understand it.
All right, so we talked about Bluetooth. We kind of hinted at IP.
Well, now, particularly you're a Control 4 guy.
Yeah.
So, yes, there are IR ports on a Control 4 device, just as there are on Crestron and everything else. But the reality is, your world is now primarily an IP control world, with a little bit of Zigbee thrown in.
Well, and
for
even,
lighting.
And I would even say that most of the control systems are that direction.
Oh, Crestron certainly.
Yeah, Crestron definitely.
But Control 4 I think, got theirs as a totality quicker.
Yes. Yeah, their entire
because they
system
didn't have a legacy world to support.
True, and not only that, but their controllers are IP based. So when a controller talks to another controller, it's all on the network. They don't communicate over Zigbee or over CrestNet or their version of whatever that would be. Right. So because of that, they're already in the IP and they're already at that point. Now, with IP, you have the benefit of what like RS232 and Serial gives you, which is a birth of commands and an acknowledgement that it received the command. But you can also get periodic updates from the device, which is also capable on RS232. But the biggest difference is that you're not restricted by the number of serial ports that you have physically on the device.
Which is awesome.
Yes. So that gives you the ability to have an almost endless number of devices on the network. Now, You probably don't have an endless number of devices on the network because that would bog down your network if it's not set up correctly, which, by the way, go back and watch our video on VLANing.
Which is a great video.
Yeah. But with those types of communication, you really just have, it's the flexibility of it is where it is, because you can have Wi-Fi based control. You can have hardware, hardline based control. You can have a control from this building to this building over fiber.
It's easy to have remote control from across
Right.
the country.
Right. And so you can actually, and even to the point where you could do a tunneling command from one, facility somewhere to another facility, like you said, across the world, just over IP. So long as you have that command and you have all the ports and everything open, and it's all tunneled correctly, maybe with a VPN or something, which again, go back and watch that episode because we talked about that as well. But with that, it does give you that, ability to go super long distances or have a very abstract
With a lot of data
system.
very quickly.
Right. So where are we using IP versus something
Pretty
else?
much everything now.
That's kind
And
of
look,
where it's at.
it's not just the Crestrons and the Control 4s and the RTIs. Global Cache, which is
Yeah.
lots of great little labor-saving gadgets.
They're little actually they have a serial to IP.
Yep, and
device.
they've got an IP to IR, IP to relay, and we have no financial stake in this,
No.
but as integrators, they're great tools.
Great little pieces. Now you've also got things now where Amazon and Google are working on having, they're calling it not Thread, Matter.
Matter, because it does matter.
Oh, sure. They're calling it Matter, and what it's going to do is it's local IP control from the device.
So it's not
So
cloud-based
when
anymore?
you say, Madam A, do this, turn on this light, she doesn't have to go and talk to the
So
cloud.
she's emulating Josh?
She's trying to anyways. I think Josh is doing a heck of a lot better than they could do it. Their native or natural language pickup is so much better. But yes, it allows you to have
referring to functionality.
functionality. Yes. Now it's going to be limited because
You're not going to have that many commands.
well, the device, not that many commands, and the local device has to support that Matter as well, which I'm sure is not going to be super easy, but it's there.
A white one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't even think they make those. They make gray ones.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't think that. Well, because the new ones are fabric.
Right.
Yeah, that one's
Old.
old. Man, it
First
is
gen.
actually old. Okay. So what about Zigbee?
No, see, now we're starting to get into, I've done some of the Zigbee pieces with you on our job, and the Control 4 interface on those makes it very nice.
Yes.
And I do know that Crestron has their own
Yep.
Zigbee or Z-Wave.
Yep.
I've never really used them for anything. I tell you what I did, what we used to use Bluetooth for before we get too far from it,
Sure.
is serial, to offer a complete isolation between the devices.
Oh, you actually had a Bluetooth to serial adapter.
Transmit receive units,
Interesting.
and
It air gapped it then.
it air gapped it, and we did this primarily on pool and spa controls because those were notorious for blowing out
Well, and
with
they're
spikes.
they're in a weird location.
Right.
So getting something out there to that.
Well, even if you have
that
something
point,
inside, because Bluetooth didn't offer
Sure.
the range, but you would have an inside piece that normally had a serial port on it that would tie into your control system.
Right.
And they would take the spikes from outside and just run it right in and take out
Yeah.
your automation.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Exactly.
And after this happened a couple of times, I learned my lesson and started using Bluetooth serial adapters.
Clever.
So that air gap resolved tremendous amount of issues.
So going back to the Zigbee then, some of the things that we've seen is, of course, Control 4 and even Savant and Crestron and RTI and URC and whatnot. They have their own Zigbee pieces. But then you've got things like this guy.
The Hubitat?
The Hubitat. So the Hubitat system, if this is a very DIY product for someone who's an enthusiast for automation, rather than a professional product, at least in my mind. Granted, I could definitely see a solution being used, or a solution using
Well,
this.
it's an auxiliary device to a professional. It's kind of like what is it we use to control the fans and the fireplaces? The
the Bond?
the Bond.
Yes.
It's not, but it's a DIY, but it also works
Yeah.
in our space.
Yeah. So but the nice thing about this is that it gives you, and we're not getting paid anything for this at all, by the way. But the nice thing about this is that it gives you the ability to have localized
But you
discrete
promised
commands.
me. You promised me money.
I have no money to give you. Do you quit? Is that all it takes? Is to stop paying you?
Well, in order to stop paying me, you would have had to have paid
This
me.
is true. This is true.
There's no stopping what hasn't started.
We're on YouTube. We're making the big bucks, right? Anyways, moving on.
I'm not even getting a free meal.
Yeah, right. But with something like this, it has Zigbee built into it, and there is a plethora of Zigbee devices out
tell me
there.
what I can do with that.
So this piece
In
here,
my house, what does it do for me?
so you can put this in. It takes just a little 5-volt USB power supply, which it comes with. It's got a hardwired connection, and I think you can use Wi-Fi with this as well. At one point, I think they were looking at making this into a PoE-enabled device as well, so you could just PoE power it. But the idea is you put this in. This acts as the hub.
Kind of like a Samsung Smart thing?
Exactly like a Samsung Smart thing. So you would put this in place. Then you would go out and pick up light switches, door locks, hot water, valve turners, all these things for that, even down to the point where you could pick up an IR hub, which emits IR to control other devices, and then you program all of those into this. The nice thing about this is that because it's community driven, there are community-made drivers for all of these different Zigbee devices.
So it's pretty much wide open.
Right. It also has IP capabilities, so you can have IP devices communicate to this or from this. So you can control like IPTVs or cable boxes or Rokus or whatever else from this device here as well. And it allows you to create, it's actually very fascinating, it allows you to create multiple dashboards depending on what type of device that you're connecting to this. So you can have a dashboard for a tablet, dashboard for a phone, dashboard for a computer, dashboard for a smart TV browser. And that way, you just access it through those dashboards and control it that way. It's a fascinating product, it really is. And if being more from the professional world, I can see where the enthusiasts would use this.
Can you say that word again?
Enthusiasts? No, I can't. Apparently I can't. But yeah, there's something like this gives you that Zigbee capability. But now the nice thing about Zigbee is that it's a mesh, right?
Now, do you still use a Samsung Smart Hub at home?
I don't anymore, no.
I haven't needed one in 18 months, so.
Right. And honestly, I'm considering going this direction. Because at home, I don't have control for, I don't have anything right now.
Well, no, it's because you're renting.
Well, right now. But the nice thing about this is I can just go in and just mess around with it. And honestly, the cost is lower. But I'm putting in the work to actually get it programmed and everything.
See, I legitimately reached the point I'm lazy.
Well, you use the Roku remote and
Yes.
the TV, and you're good.
And I've only got one, but both of my projectors are broken. Mm-hmm. My TV in the living room's a hole in the wall now.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no.
In fact, I actually had to work on something happened to my Amazon at home. I don't know what.
Sure.
I lost a half a dozen lights.
Oh, lights, okay.
Lights. And the audio settings reset, so I had to go back and point all my Alexa devices to a specific one for audio output, which is tied to the matrix.
Yeah.
Now, quick question. Do you think that if can I put an IP to serial adapter on that and send commands from my Amazon to my matrix?
Maybe if you were using something from Global Cache, they might have something that would actually integrate with that.
It'd be nice to say, Alexa, do this and set music level too.
That might be kind of interesting.
Now, in fact, I tell you what annoys me more than anything else on Alexa devices is the inability to set a fixed volume output on an Echo.
Yeah.
Because people will walk in, Alexa set volume to, and without realizing that they have to go to the touch panel, and then they wonder why it doesn't get loud.
Well, and that's where the integration comes in with the larger automation systems.
Well, and that's when you put in a CA5.
Or a CA10 or an EA5, yeah.
Because
or now
Alexa
the Core 5, I think is what it's called now.
Just the Alexa's ability to change volume on somebody's whim.
Yeah.
Kills you if it's a source.
Right. So with Zigbee, let's go back to Zigbee. because it's a mesh system, and I'm going to include Z-Wave and Bluetooth mesh and all that kind of stuff, because it's a mesh system, the benefit to it is that to extend or grow the physical size of your capabilities of extending something, all you have to do is just put an additional Zigbee device in the system. Right,
it's an auto repeater.
Right, and so it just extends it from there. So you can have, and not only that, but it acts as a strengthening. So if one of the devices falls off the network, it can still communicate around a different pathway with that device that's out there. So the mesh allows that ability to spread out into the home and have a decent amount of coverage and control over as many things as possible, so long as you have enough devices to get the command to jump over to it. Right, and so that's kind of a benefit to that type of system. And honestly, it's something that I'm looking at doing more in my house.
Mm-hmm.
When we actually buy a house, we're looking at doing all the light switches. We're looking at doing all these other devices in there and putting something in there like this, where I can build it to how my family wants to use it.
Now, I still prefer, and we had this discussion on the beach house, I still prefer centralized lighting that's in a can.
Sure. Yeah. If I could afford centralized lighting, yes, I would put it in.
Because the ability to, when I tell it to do something,
Mm-hmm.
short of a substantial infrastructure failure,
Sure.
it's going to do it.
Yeah.
Now I have added the Alexa IR or the Alexa relays, Alexa control relays, because I have an old Crestron system.
Yep.
I have a CP2, I'm an old man. But I can say Alexa turn off and it shuts down that relay, which goes into an IO on the Crestron
And then it triggers from there.
Right.
Yeah. So from the mesh systems, right, then we jump into something that's more residential or consumer based. In fact, it's in the name, CEC.
Okay, what's in the name?
Consumer Electronics Control.
Wow.
Right? Well, that one's easy. Well, at least I think.
How long have you worked here?
Almost 4 years.
And you got that one finally.
Yeah. I picked up on that one pretty early on.
Okay.
Yeah.
2.5 years.
So CEC, the thing about CEC is that, well, it's in our sign off.
Yeah. Turn off CEC.
Well, truthfully, we may have to fix
But not
that.
yet. But not yet.
Almost.
But not yet.
I will say, CEC is very quickly, they do those like charts as time moves on, like what's becoming more and more, popular and whatnot. CEC is very quickly
It's
becoming...
starting to stabilize.
And I think that's the best way to put it. It's stabilizing as an actual useful method, right?
Where everybody's using the same command structure, and
Right.
that was not the case early on.
No, and that was the downfall of CEC, is that everyone said, well, here's CEC, but here's our command for CEC.
Yes.
Right?
It's our roll our own dashboard for your computer
right.
with a ton of bloatware.
Right, yeah, exactly. So I will say...
Can I just get a Windows 11 stripped?
Yes, you can. Yeah, you
Without
can download,
any bloatware?
Yeah,
but I mean, that's kind of...
Now, you have to put in some work, but...
CEC's getting to the point where it's just exactly what it's
just
supposed to
CEC.
be.
That's right. Yeah, it's just sending the commands for control of those devices. Power on and off is solid now. I can definitely say...
and we've used it on the LG here.
Yeah, power on and off with CEC, it just works. They've done fantastic with getting that part of it working great. Navigation controls, not great, but they're getting better. The ability for it to know what it's connected to, which is just an EDID piece of information, that's there as well. Volume up and down. We see that being used a lot with ARC, right? With audio return channel and eARC. And honestly, that's flawless in most cases.
Because that's a very fixed command. They know what it is.
It's very straightforward. And it's a very close connection in most cases.
Yeah, you're looking at 3 feet or less of HDMI cable.
Sure. Now, it's not without its faults, and it's not without its possibility of growth. And in fact, I see CEC as something that's growing. We have our CS44MEE matrix. We have CEC commands inside of that matrix. So you can send out CEC commands through the GUI to control the devices that are connected to it.
Which is awesome.
And it works great. It was something that I wasn't for sure that we should do or we're going to do.
Tell people we did.
We're tell people that we did, but honestly, try it out. You just go to, you have to be in the web GUI, but go to the IP address, sign in, and you can go in and actually use the CEC control to control the devices that you're connected to. It works great. Now, it does still cause problems with CEC, so you may want to turn it off on many devices if you're having a problem. That's one of the first things that you and I go to when something weird is happening is, did you turn off CEC? Yep. Right?
Well, particularly in the early days of splitters, they were just paralleled. So if you turned off one TV, it turned off every TV in the house and the sources.
Well, and we've learned that yes, exactly. But we've learned now that many of the remotes that we thought were doing IR to control the device, they're doing CEC. So like when you pick up the Roku remote and you're using the Roku remote to turn the TV on and off and control volume, it's not the IR out of the remote. It's not learning what the IR code is. It's actually doing CEC over the HDMI connection. And it works great. It really does. It's a fantastic way of control method. It's just not there yet. But it's coming. I think so. Where would you use it?
Pretty much exactly what you said. Now, the real question is CEC going to expand into other things in home automation with Alexa, Google, and Apple Home and things like that? Because it's a pretty...
Maybe in the residential side of things, in the consumer side, sure. I don't know if it's going to go into Control 4, Crestron, and Savant, or anybody like that.
Well, you know, for... who was it? It wasn't Leaf, it was Hydra. Hydra Matrix, they were the first company.
Hail Hydra?
Yeah. They were the first ones to really push CEC through their matrices. Now, failed company, but
sure,
the concept was a good idea.
Yeah. So, we also have another one that I didn't think of.
Okay.
Voice.
Oh, yeah, Josh.
Alexa, Google, whatever else
Siri.
it is.
Siri is definitely...
Siri. Yeah, well, the HomeKit, it was just it was one of those things that they're like, we can too, and then they just didn't. That was it. But truthfully, if you're doing automation systems, Josh is fantastic.
Agreed.
And the capabilities of it versus Alexa and Google. Now, Alexa and Google, again, very consumer-based, and they give you answers to questions, and they help you do shopping and whatever else.
At no point I don't do my shopping, where's my stuff, I don't get that.
Sure.
I can't just say, Alexa, what's today's weather?
Sure.
That is the extent of my questioning.
Now, what I'll do is I will put on like shopping lists, like I'll create shopping lists and whatnot. I have my garage door, the close method of my garage door is on Google, and I use that daily. I open up the garage door as I'm walking out, and then as I'm getting in the car, I'm saying, okay, close the garage. I
got a button for that.
Well,
what was your first? What was your first method of control?
RF.
No.
Or IR.
Push a button.
Oh, push a button. Yeah, push a button. Well, the push button then goes to RF.
But I'm still pushing a button.
Yeah. We actually skipped over RF. So with RF, we have 433 and 512 and or 512.
512.
No, 433 and what was the other one?
No. You've got it's 433, 418.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I don't know. But URC, for example, did a lot of 418 stuff. Crestron did some 418.
Sure.
So they'd have a separate 433 antenna and a 418 antenna.
Yeah. So that kind of covers the different methods.
There are advantages to that.
Yeah.
Now, typically it's one way. There is two-way RF. Crestron did a two-way RF on the WX. But one way, you press a button, there's no delay. The thing with, if you're going to try to Wi-Fi something, IP, it has to make communication. This has to establish everything and get it set up, and it's not just a blind send.
Yeah, correct.
The advantage of an RF is blind send.
Yeah.
It just sends it. It doesn't wait to make the establish the connections and all that. So I would much rather do straight up RF for volume control and channel select.
Sure.
Or Bluetooth now. I mean, the problem with IP is you have a tablet and you want to do volume control.
Yeah.
It may not be as quick to respond.
No.
And they're not. And if you want to turn the volume down because something's happening, you want
immediate control.
You want immediate control.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
RF is better. The Bluetooth is better. The Roku remote, you hit that mute button.
It mutes.
It mutes. There's no discussion.
So, one of the things that we'll talk about, and I'm still working on it. We talked about that boot camp, the AV boot camp. Control methods are part of that. There's the way that the control methods communicate from the source or the controller. In this case, it's the source to the endpoint, which in this case it could be whatever device you control.
You're going to force that control for lingo down me, aren't you?
Listen. You're just from blue states, but whatever.
Nope, not doing it. Not doing it. Wouldn't be prudent. Not doing it.
But that signal path is all part of that boot camp. And so we really have to take into consideration the different types of control methods, their signal paths, how they're getting to from start to end, how they're getting there, and we have to make sure that they actually get there. And so that's all part of that and part of that thought process, which we'll do. I plan on doing an entire series of AV boot camp where we go through everything. So stay tuned for that. Now, Brent,
Adam,
this is going out. Today is the 10th that this is going out.
Sure.
And then we have an episode on the 17th that I don't have memorized yet as to what it is. However,
we do know what the 24th is.
We do know what the 24th is. The 24th is actually one that happened because of the 3rd, because you had just come back from the
TV
shootout, and we wanted to do an ISF video.
And very excited about this one.
Yeah, you actually reached out to someone who does the ISF, so to Jason.
There's an ISF instructor from Meridio.
From Meridio. He'll be in the area, which is great, and so he's going to come by, and we're going to not necessarily do an ISF calibration on the TV.
No, but we want to see what's involved.
And maybe he could do like a quick little thing on it or whatever, because it needs work.
It's bad.
It needs work.
It's out of the box.
So come back on the 24th. Come back on the 17th.
Jason Dustel from Meridio, ISF, will be here, and he's an instructor.
He'll be here on the 24th. Come back on the 17th, where we're going to talk about another episode, which it's escaping me at the moment. But definitely come back on the 24th, and then I believe after the 24th is when we're starting that AV boot camp.
Okay.
And so that way we have.
I love your optimism.
We're going to have a series of episodes based around that. And I'm hoping that the structure of it works out really well to where you can take those, and if you have a new installer, a new employee, new salesperson, you can give them those episodes to watch, and that they will help that person to be ready for the AV world.
Go out and make you money.
Go out and make you money, or make themselves money, or do whatever it is. Or if you need a refresher, check it out. So, anyways, come back for that. We'll see you then. If you are down in South Florida, I don't know where I'm going to be. Actually, I don't know the name of the place, but I'll be in South Florida. So reach out to.
What is the show?
Well, it's with Tom Pasafumi from Phoenix Marketing.
Okay.
And then of course, if you buy from us directly and you're in the area, you probably buy through Ray, who is our.
Or if you buy from Phoenix Marketing, give your rep a call and he'll tell you where to go.
Yep. Come check us out. We'll be there. We'll have Big Dog Power with us. There's going to be a few other manufacturers there as well. I don't think you want to hear from anybody when you're over there. So
they're welcome to call me. If they're working, I'm working.
Sure. Are you though?
Yes.
Okay.
So now, if they're not working,
I figured you would be drinking. I mean, come on, you're going to wine country. You gotta have. You gotta have some wine.
This is a terrible thing to say, but pretty much every wine I've ever tasted
tastes the same.
Tastes like cough syrup.
Well, there you go. There is that.
Now there's a lot of eating to be done there.
This is true. Yeah, you're going to come back a few pounds heavier.
I hope so.
Yep. Okay, well, with that, everybody, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for putting up with what we're talking about. And if you helped you out in any way, let us know down in the comments. And like, share, and subscribe is always helpful. Come back next week where we're going to talk about something new. Come back on the 24th where we're going to talk about ISF.
I'm very excited about that.
I really am too.
Because first off, he really is a great instructor.
Yes.
He's very funny.
Yep.
He's slightly cuter than you. Not as cute as me.
Sure. Well, sure. Okay, whatever. Come back after that. We're going to do the AV Bootcamp series. I'm looking forward to that one as well. I think it's going to be a good series to help everybody out. And as always, who are you?
I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
Reboot early.
Reboot often.
Turn off CEC.
Don't cut your wires too short.
Call tech support.
And make sure you've got 20 meters for your HDBase T.
Have a great weekend.
We'll see y'all later.
Thank you.